I want to sort of propose to you an idea, and it's an idea that actually didn't make it into the book because I didn't think of it until afterwards, which is weird, but it speaks to that nature of continuous innovation, continuous improvement, right? That a book is just sort of shipped, but it's not actually done. You get into conversations afterwards and things happen. And the idea is this, that the stories that we tell ourselves are true even when they're not true. The stories that we tell ourselves are true even when they're not true. They're true even when they're totally false, when they're not based in reality at all. The more you tell it to yourself, the more it becomes true. In psychology, we call this a confirmation bias. And the confirmation bias says that you will selectively filter in or filter out anything that confirms your perspective, confirms what you've decided the case already is, right? If you don't believe me, I'll give you two examples really quickly right off the bat. If you've ever bought a car in the last year, it's amazing how many people suddenly drive that car, as if the world has conspired to put more Nissan Muranos on the road just because you got one, right? The other example of confirmation bias at work is starting to heat up. It happens about every 4 years once the candidates are decided, and suddenly you realize that half of your friends on Facebook are ludicrous, right? And the other half are brilliant, of course, right? So we selectively filter in or filter out information that confirms our worldview. Better put, the stories that we tell ourselves are true even when they're not true. Now, why does this matter? Well, when it comes to creativity and innovation, we tell a lot of stories, right? Today, actually, you heard 3 really great stories, but we tell ourselves a lot of stories that become true and in some cases block us. And I didn't set out to write a book around creativity and innovation. I actually set out to write a leadership book. What are the keys to sort of leading innovation, et cetera? And what I kept finding was that there were these stories that were blocking people. There were stories that people say about their ability to be creative that just seemed odd. And as I dove into it, you started to get this idea that they were treating creativity almost like it was a religion, right? And it sort of makes sense, right? Because the people that you would call creative, right, they kind of look like priests of some Near Eastern religion, right? They've got tattoos in interesting places, piercings in more interesting places, right? And they actually call themselves, they use creative as a noun, right? Even though we would just call them baristas, right? So what happens there, inevitably, one of the challenges is that it defines who's in and who's out. And then we begin to tell stories that confirm to that. Right? If you've ever used the phrase, "it just came to me," you ever use that to describe an idea? It just came to me. I always wonder where it was before, right? But it speaks to this idea that it's somewhere out there and it visits certain people more than others, right? And then again, if we could figure out where it is, we could just go there. And some people have already figured that out, and that's why they're consistently creative, right? Or others, one of my other favorite ones is a lot of people will use the phrase inspired. I don't feel inspired. You take that back to the Greek and you find it has roots in this idea of being breathed upon. The Greeks believed in these muses, these divine sisters that would visit mortals and breathe upon them these inspirations, which I always found kind of interesting because they had different muses for different disciplines. And some people would hedge their bets and just go to all of them, right? And this is a little weird, but fortunately, in that place, we have 50 to 100 years of psychology. Right? And this is one area that I always think is quite interesting. We know now where that place is. It's actually inside of you, right? So we can go there often, right? And one of the things that's interesting for me, I teach at a faith-based university, and so the common question is, well, are you saying that God doesn't give us our great ideas? Well, I think he does. But he also created gravity, right? So just because he has the ability to interfere with something doesn't mean we don't also have these rules. Right? And fortunately, in psychology, we do, and we can understand the repetitive process and the science of creativity and innovation, which I think is hugely interesting, right? Because then we're not just relying on our baristas, as it were. So.